Okay, so next we have Keith Wilkinson from JM Architects doing a session on Dynamo dictionaries. So very much looking forward to this, and welcome, Keith. And
thanks, Kevin.
Please take the floor.
Cheers. Yeah, I have to say I'm mildly terrified now. It was a great job there by Laura. I've just been watching the number of attendees and we haven't lost any. So I feel this is going to be like whenever Terry Wogan left Radio 2 and all of a sudden listener numbers are going to drop. But we'll see what we can do. So if I share screen. Okay, how's that?
That's great.
Awesome. Right. Okay, that's the wrong slideshow though. We'll be there in a second. Just bear with me. Chat amongst yourselves.
No pressure.
Okay. Right. Are we good? Are we saying Dynamo 101 Introduction to Dictionaries in normal mode?
We are. Full screen.
Awesome. Right. Right. I'm Keith Wilkinson. I'm the BIM manager at JM Architects. I've been with them for just over 6 years. I'm an Autodesk certified professional, amongst other things, and have been an Autodesk certified instructor. In terms of Dynamo, I've kind of been using it on and off, probably for about 5 years, but if I'm brutally honest, I ride on the shoulders of others. I'm not great at sort of learning things by just by looking at a program, so I tend to fiddle with things and then ask questions on the forum where much greater minds than mine come up with kind of answers. And that usually gives me enough direction to get to where I want to go. And over that period of time, I have got better at kind of basic stuff, but I would only class myself as an intermediate Dynamo user. But I do find it fascinating, and I love working with it. I love some of the stuff that you can do and some of the stuff that you can automate. So presentation tonight, what we're going to look at is, as I say, we're going to be talking about dictionaries in Dynamo. So we're going to look at what the definition of a dictionary is. Then we're going to go on, we're going to look at how we actually create a dictionary, look at some of the standard dictionary tools. And then with a couple of examples in terms of applications, we're going to look at how we can change room numbers and also how we can update multiple room parameters in one go. And then just a very brief summary at the end. So the first question I want to ask is, what is a vending machine? Because we're here to talk about dictionaries. So what I wanted to do was talk about a vending machine first. So this is a vending machine. And a vending machine is full of chocolate bars and bags of crisps and everything else. And if I put in my money and I type in 401, the vending machine will dispense me a Mars bar. Okay. If I put in 406, it will dispense me a Twix. If I put in 412, it will dispense me a Twirl. So in terms of my vending machine, if I was going to write a definition of that, it is a vending machine links the chocolate with a unique number. Specific chocolate can then be retrieved from the vending machine simply by entering the appropriate unique number. And essentially a dictionary works in exactly the same way. If we replace vending machine for dictionary, chocolate for data, and our unique number for a key, we get what is essentially a dictionary. So a dictionary links packets of information or data with a unique key. Specific packets can then be retrieved from the dictionary simply by entering the appropriate unique key. And anybody that's worked with Excel, and if I just jump across to here, anybody who's worked with Excel before will maybe be familiar with a command in Excel called VLookup. And it's one of the things in Excel that really switched me on to being able to use Excel to manipulate data, and in the same way with Dynamo. And what I can do here is I can basically have a table in here where I've got 1 matching to A, 2 matching to B, 3 matching to C, and 4 matching to D. And by using VLookup in this cell here, when this is the settings for the VLookup that I've set up, I can change the value in cell E4 and it will retrieve the corresponding value from my table. So if I put in 3, I'll get C. If I put in 4, I'll get D. Okay, so again, that is essentially what we're talking about whenever we're looking at dictionaries. So if we look at what the workflow would be for creating a dictionary, what we need is we need a series of keys. In this case, we're saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and we need a series of values. Within the dictionary, then, we match those keys to the values, so 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. And then we use another node to retrieve the values from the dictionary using whatever key it is that we want as our input. So we put in 3, we get C. So if we go over to Dynamo, which I have here. So what we've got here is a very simple script in Dynamo. So we have our important node here is our dictionary dot by keys values. So what this node is looking for is it's looking for an input of keys, so our 1, 2, 3, 4, and at the same time it's looking for an input of values, so our A, B, C, D. So what I've got here is I've basically just got a code block, which Laura spoke about briefly in her presentation. So what I'm doing is creating these lists, I'm feeding them into the dictionary, and then to retrieve the information that's in that dictionary, and if I run this just to let you see, actually I'll put it on automatic. So if I run this, you'll see here it's created my dictionary, so it's now got D, A, C, B. Now for whatever reason, Dynamo likes to muddle these things up. It doesn't keep them in the order in which you put them in, but it doesn't matter because it's still linked with the right key. So D is still linked with 4, A is still linked with 1, and so on. So if I come over here, I've now got a node, which is a dictionary value at key. So this allows me to now pull the information back out of my dictionary again. So in the same way with my VLookup, or the same way with my vending machine, if I put a number in, it will retrieve the corresponding value from the dictionary. So I put in 1, I get A. I put in 4, I get D. If I put in a number that doesn't exist, I'll get a warning and I get a null out here. And basically that warning just says, you've given me a key and I don't have a corresponding value for it. Okay. As well as retrieving individual values, we can retrieve lists of values. So I can feed in 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will return A, B, C, D. And equally, I can take a more complex list. So I've got 2, 2, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2. And if I feed that in, then it gives me the corresponding values from the dictionary. So although I have just 4 values coming in here and 4 values in the dictionary, I can pull out as many as I want whenever I interrogate it with this dictionary value at key. Now, one thing that's important is the keys within the dictionary must be strings. So you'll see here we've got a warning coming up and it says, dictionary by keys values expects arguments types string, comma, variable, but was called with integer string. So in this case here, I've got my code block is generating numbers rather than strings. So if I wanted this to work, I would need to take this in or output here, feed it into a string from object node and run that, and that will get rid of that. And again, it generates my dictionary. Okay. So as well as creating our dictionary, we also have a range of other kind of nodes within the standard out-of-the-box nodes for dictionaries that allow us to do different things. Now, I'll be honest, I don't use a huge amount of these, but I thought it would be useful just to run through what it is that you can do with them. So probably the simplest one is a dictionary.count, and that just simply tells you the number of elements within your dictionary. So same output as we get just by hovering over the output here. So 4, if we were to look at this, we've got a list with 4 elements in it. Okay, so that just tells us how many items we have in our dictionary. Dictionary.values will tell us what the values within the dictionary are. Again, we've got a very small dictionary here, but you can imagine if you've got a much bigger dictionary that it can be useful just to be able to look at that and see what the values are and see whether your dictionary has been created with all the values you expect. The next one, dictionary.components, gives us the values and the keys. So it'll give us those as two separate outputs. And again, I'm just using a list create node here just to pull those into one list. So you'll see here we've got our 4132 and the corresponding DACB. We can also remove items from dictionaries. So using the dictionary.remove keys, all I need to do is put a number in here and it will remove that key from the dictionary. So in this case 1, so it will take out A, and that leaves me with DCB. Okay. Then we've got set values at keys. So this actually allows us to add in, actually let me just do this one first. We'll change value at key first. So set value at keys, what we can do is we can say actually for key 4, instead of the value being D, I want that value to be E. And what I can do is I can use this node here, it'll feed that in. Again, I'm just taking the components out at the end, and you can see here we've now got 4 is corresponding to E rather than D. And additionally with this node with set values at keys, we can add additional keys in and additional values. So here we've got 5 and E, and again you can see at the end here we have 5 added into our list and E, and we've still got our 1, 2, 3, 4 and our A, B, C, D. Okay, so those are some of the nodes that we have access to in terms of the out-of-the-box nodes. There are other dictionary nodes and other packages as well that are worth a look at. But in terms of this presentation, we're just concentrating solely on the out-of-the-box stuff. Okay, so if we jump back here. So that's just a screenshot. We'll share the PowerPoint presentation, or I'll put it on my Twitter feed at the end for anybody that wants to have a look at it. So that's just the same stuff there. So basic dictionary rules whenever we're creating our dictionaries. First of all, the keys must be strings. Also, the keys must be unique. If you have keys with duplicate values, again, the dictionary create node will return an error. And the values that you use can be any variable type at all. It doesn't matter. Okay, so long as it's a list that you can feed in, then Dynamo will be able to pull those out. Okay, so moving on, what we're going to do is just have a look at a couple of practical examples of this. On this, what I'm using is just the standard Revit sample file, the little 2-story house that they have. So if you want to recreate this yourself or have a go at it yourself, it's pretty straightforward. So our first scenario here is the client has requested that we renumber all the rooms in the project. Very much a real world scenario. We get asked to do this quite a lot on projects, particularly schools, usually about 2 days before we're due to hand everything over. The client comes along and says, oh, actually, I want to change all the room numbers. So this just shows you a way in which we can do that. So what we've done here is we've sent a spreadsheet to the client and said, fill in whatever room numbers you would like against the existing room numbers. Okay, so the existing room number 101 wants to become 00_001. So those existing numbers are going to become our keys in our dictionary, and the proposed room values are going to become, the proposed numbers are going to become our values in the dictionary. So the workflow to make this work is we're going to start, as I said, we've got this information in Excel. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab that data from Excel. We're going to clean and sort it so that we just have the information that we want. We're then going to use those keys and values to create our dictionary. And then what we want to do is we want to retrieve the values from the dictionary. But to do that, what we need to do is we need to gather all the rooms in the project, get their room numbers, and then use those room numbers as the keys to retrieve the information. Once we've got that information coming out, we're then going to write those values to the rooms. So again, if we jump over here, so this is our script. I'm just going to run it at the start just to get some data into everything. Oh, should probably have shown you this first. Let's go back. So that's our model. And what I've done is I've added in, as I say, this is basically just the sample project. I've simply added in an additional parameter here called room number underscore JMA, just to show you how the numbers come in. You could easily overwrite the numbers that are here if you wanted to do that. I'm generally a little bit nervous about things like that. So as I say, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to actually write them into a new field. So as I say, if we run that, just to give us some data in here. So the first bit, it was getting the data from Excel. So I'm going to run through just some of the nodes that we're using here. Again, while we're focusing on dictionaries, I think it's helpful just to know where the data comes from. So in this case, we have a data import Excel, and we're just using a file path and a file from path nodes. So the file path tells Dynamo where to look, and then this node actually goes and looks there and gets the file that resides at that location. The code block I'm using here, just to put in room numbers, goes and looks for that sheet within the Excel spreadsheet. And then I've just got a Boolean down here. This is just a true false. So I want to read everything as strings. So if there are numbers there, I want to make sure that they're coming in as strings, just so that I can feed them into my dictionary. And then finally, I've got a Boolean false here just to show Excel. I don't need it to actually open up Excel to show me that. That's all that's happening there. Okay, so my output from that is, if we look at that, I've got a couple of nulls. And if I actually just hop over to, if I can do that. So we look in here, this is the data that it's actually reading. So you'll see we've got a blank row at the top here, and then we've got a headers for existing and proposed. Okay, so we've got null, null, existing, proposed, and then we've got the data that we're actually interested in. So what we need to do is we need to clean and sort that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of the first two lists here. So I want to get rid of my nulls, and I want to get rid of the existing and proposed. So I'm just using a list drop items, and I'm setting that at a value of 2. And now if I look at that, you can see we've gone from having null, null, existing, proposed, 101 to just having 101 at the top. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a list transpose node. And what that does is it basically, if you're looking at it in Excel, it changes it from being rows to being columns effectively. So what it will do is it will group everything that was in the first column together, and it will group everything that's in the second column together. So my output from here is I got all my existing room numbers, 101, 102, 103, etc. And then in my second list here, I've got 00, 001, 00002. Okay. I'm then using a code block just to split that into 2 separate lists. The first one being my keys, the second one being my values, and feeding that in to create my dictionary. Okay, so we've gathered the information, we've cleaned and sorted it, and we've created the dictionary. While that's going on, down here we've got our get rooms from project. So with this, I'm using category dot by name. I'm starting to use this more. You can use just the category list, but the number of categories in Revit varies from version to version. If you do it this way, then it doesn't change. So all I'm doing, again, just using a code block to say rooms, category by name, and then all elements of categories. And you can see we get a list there with all the rooms in it. From there, I'm using an element.get parameter value by name, and I'm just wanting to pull out the room number. So again, that matches the keys that I've used within my dictionary. So if we look at that, just very briefly, you can see there. So we've got room numbers in no particular order. And this is one of the brilliant things about dictionaries. It doesn't matter what order those numbers are in. It's going to go and look in the dictionary. It's going to look for 206, and it's going to return the corresponding value. Okay. So up here, I've got my value, dictionary value at key. So I'm feeding in my room numbers as my keys and feeding in my dictionary that we created over here. And then all I need to do is basically take my element, set parameter by name, the parameter name that I want to use. So in this case, room number underscore JMA. And whenever I run that, I've got 14 rooms. And whenever I look at my Dynamo or my Revit file, you can see it's written all these in, and you can see they all correspond. So 106 corresponds to 00006, 205 to 01005. Okay, so that's our first simple dictionary. And again, just a copy of the script there for reference. But our next scenario is working with multiple values. So in the first one, we were just taking the room number and putting in a new room number. But what if we want to be able to put in a lot of data against those rooms? So what we want to do is put in all this information about occupancy, department, ceiling finish, wall finish, floor finish. And this could be completed by anybody within your organization and your project team who's maybe not a Revit user or maybe not a Dynamo user, but you want to get this information in and they're best placed to be able to fill that in. I think people like that do tend to exist in every office at the moment. And this is a good way to be able to get them to be able to input into the process. So what we've got, again, we're using our existing room number as the key. We've then got our values, which in this case, we've got our 5 lists effectively. And what we've also done here is use our column headings to match the parameter names. So these correspond to the parameter names within Revit. Okay, so our workflow, not dissimilar to the last one. So again, we're getting our data from Excel, clean and sort, create our dictionary, retrieve the values, and again, we've got our rooms from the project, getting those room numbers. We have an additional bit here where we're creating a parameter list from our data here. And then what we're doing is we're using that parameter list along with the values that are coming out of our dictionary and the room numbers to be able to write all that information into the rooms. So if we jump back to room data. Okay, so this is our graph here. Again, it's kind of color coded to match our workflow. So again, we have our get room data by from Excel. And what that's doing to clean and sort our data this time. So if we look at this, this becomes a good deal more complex than what we had previously. So I'll just run that. So you'll see here what we've got is existing, proposed, name, occupancy, department. So this information, we're going to pull some of this out to be our parameter names. And then down here, we've got our room number, our new room number, room name. And then from 3 onwards is the information that we're wanting to put into the model. Okay, so to clean and sort that, what we want to do, again, I'm using a list rest of items here. And what this does is it basically just drops off the first list. So it's going to drop off all these parameter names. So if I look at that, you'll see here, all the parameter names are gone, and all I'm left with is essentially the data. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to get my keys. So that's going to be, if we look at this one, that's going to be the first item in each one of these lists. Now, there was an addition put into Dynamo a few versions back where you're able to start using a thing called levels. Laura spoke briefly about using lacing. This is another little thing that we can do within Dynamo. And if anybody's sitting there thinking, oh, I know all about levels and lacing, I think it'd make a great presentation in the future because it does get quite complex. But in this case, I've set this to L2, and what that will do is it basically looks for the first value in each one of these lists. Okay, so I'm using 0 here to match with 0. And if I look at the output from here, you'll see I just get the room numbers. Okay. If we then go down to the next bit, so in this case, list drop items. So if I look at my list here, I have 101, 00, and kitchen dining. I want to get rid of those 3 bits of information. So again, I'm using list drop items with levels. So I've got my level set to level 2 here, and I want to drop the first 3 items off that list. And what that leaves me with is the 2 support, Dulux Easy Care, and the Row Hill Twist Grey. Okay. So while that's going on, we're also wanting to grab the parameter list. So again, what I can do is go back to my original data here. And in this case, rather than dropping the first item, what I want to do is I want to get the first item in the list. So I'm using list, get item at index, list 0. And then again, I'm dropping items because I don't want the first 3. The same way as I didn't want it with the data, I don't need those with the parameters either. So the same exercise here. In this case, I don't need to use levels because I've only got a single list feeding into this. So I've just got one list. So all I want to do is drop the first 3 items off that. And what you'll see here now is my list of parameters. Okay. Again, I've had get room numbers from project running. and that goes and grabs my room numbers. So again, I have a list here of my room numbers. Then all I need to do again is use my dictionary values at key. So I have my dictionary that I've created up here with my sorted data, and I've got my keys which are coming in from my room numbers. So this will then give me basically a list of lists. So it's looking at saying room 206, this is the occupancy, this is the department, and these are the finishes that are going to be used in that room, and the same all the way down that list. Okay, and then all I need to do is use my element set parameter by name node, same as I did in the first one, but this time again I'm using my levels to make sure that it cycles through each room and each element within each one of these sublists. Again, this isn't quite the place to explain exactly how this works, but again, I've had to set my lacing to longest as well to get this to work. But one node, a list in of parameters, a list in of values, and what it will do is actually go and write that information to each one of those rooms. So if we go back to our Revit file, you can see everything there has been written in literally a split second. So rather than me having to come in and input all this information again, I can drag it directly from Excel, put it into my Revit file, so long as I have a unique key to be able to match the data from the Excel file into my Revit file.
Keith, we've got a question on the chat if you want to take it now, or would you rather wait till the end?
Well, we're pretty much at the end. If I can find my PowerPoint again. So I'll just run through the summary and then we can do the question. I think it's probably as easy.
Okay.
So just in a very quick summary, things to remember: dictionaries, keys must be strings and the keys must be unique. Those two things are really important. Dictionaries can contain individual values or lists, so it doesn't matter. You can do one or the other. You know, literally you can pile as much information in there as you want, so long as you have that key to match the information. You can add values, remove values, or update values as you need to. To say personally, I don't really have much of a need for that because I'm usually pulling in data from Excel or using data that's already in the model. But you can do that. They make mapping large quantities of data really, really easy. We've recently done this for Kobe, pulling in a whole pile of manufacturer information. And again, we're just matching that up using marks and type marks. So it's dead simple and a really reliable way of getting that information back into your model again. Important to remember that dictionaries in Dynamo will not dispense chocolate bars. For that, you have to go to the vending machine. And finally, dictionaries are amazingly useful. So if anybody needs to get in touch with me after this, that's my email address and my Twitter handle. So by all means, give me a shout. Fairly active on both. Oh, sorry, let me go back. So Rob, do you want to go with the questions?
Yep. First of all, the vending machine analogy was very, very popular. I can't tell if it's popular because it just reminded everybody to get a chocolate bar, or whether it was a very good way of explaining dictionaries. I think it was the latter. It was definitely the latter, I think.
Yeah. I know what I'm doing right after this.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's going. There was a question actually whether it would definitely dispense a Twix. That was all anybody cared about. But anyway, can the keys and values be opened? Can the keys and values be open for an unknown amount of arguments in the same way that args and quargs work within Python?
I don't know.
You chose this crowd. This crowd were going to ask you some complicated questions, and there you go.
I'm sure I said at the start I'm an intermediate user. I don't know. I guess technically it does, just because of the way in which dictionaries work. Because you can always add stuff into it, but you need to add it in with a key and a value. So yes, I guess it does, but it just operates in a slightly different way.
Keith, Deanie, if you do want to elaborate on that, I've just enabled your audio.
You just done what?
to the person who asked the question.
Oh, right. Okay.
Do you want to add anything, Keith?
I don't want to add anything.
Sorry, we've got two Keiths.
That's very confusing. Keith's asking a question to Keith.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it was really just the room codes that you had as your example. If you had an unknown amount of those and an unknown amount of the values that you then want to add relative to them, I think you answered to a degree with the second example that you was running through. So yeah, I think you kind of covered it. But yeah, I think it kind of answered the question.
Okay, I'll be honest, it's a little bit beyond. I'm one of these people in terms of Python. I'm barely scratching the surface of Python, so in terms of understanding quite where you're coming from, is a little bit difficult for me.
Yeah, I was just playing around with something in Python, and it was a similar approach to what you've been doing there in Dynamo, and I was just trying to understand the way that Dynamo would do it, and I think what you've done is probably the way that it should be done, and therefore I think I need to probably play around with that system as well. So it might be worth just comparing the two. But thank you. And
Okay, yeah, no problem.
the vending machine was a very good analogy, definitely.
Cheers.
Vending machine was very popular.
Can I ask Keith who asked the question? Do you mean the way it should have been done was the way he used the lacing at the end of the second bit?
Yes, the lacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said in the presentation, I think it would be really good if somebody, perhaps one of our more advanced users, who really understands these things, could do a presentation on levels and lacing, because it is something that for me it's a lot of trial and error to get. I know what I want and I know the nodes will do it, but I find it's a lot of trial and error and working out which one, what level I need to set at, what lacing I need to get the output that I'm looking for. So.
I think that's a call to Mr. David Wood, wherever he is. He's on our committee, but he's not here today. But he seems to be a rather expert on this thing. He's tried to explain it to me several times.
He did a presentation on it a couple of years ago.
I know.
Very cool.
It was a very, very good presentation.
Yeah.
I remember every word of it.
I think that's another call for a good example for structured data.
Yep.
I think with dictionaries, I think having your information in an organized format, it doesn't matter whether you're working in Dynamo or whether you're doing Kobe or whether you're working in Excel, structured data is the way to go. Okay, well, Keith, that was excellent. Thank you very much for stepping up and putting that out there for everyone to see. I think it's really informative stuff.